Welcome back to r/Neighbors from Hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled The Old Uno Reverse Card. One day I came home from work and someone else's car was parked out front of my house. No matter, I park outside my neighbor's house. When I wake up the next day and go out to my car to leave for work, there is a note tucked on my windshield. I unfold it and it reads, "Do not park here ever again, or else," in a font so large it takes up the whole page of the paper. I folded it up, placed it in my glove box, and there it sat for nearly a year, until the day he parked out front of my house. I tucked the note he left me on his window and went to bed. The next day, as I was enjoying my morning coffee, I watched his wife go to get in the car and noticed the note. She read it with a puzzled look that quickly turned to rage. I thought she would storm over to ask me about it, but apparently she recognized her husband's handwriting and went to ask him. He had to sheepishly explain to her that he left it on my car, and she brought him over, tail between his legs, to apologize. We had a beer, he stared at the floor the whole time. It was cool. You know guys, I think in this story it is pretty clear who is the dominant person in the family, and in German we actually say that woman is wearing the pants in the family, but I'm not sure if a similar idiom exists in English. Maybe she's the one with balls? I'm not sure. And the next one is titled, Neighbor did not like how I did my own lawn. I moved into my house around the same time as my next door neighbors, new construction neighborhood. We both do our own lawns, they bag their cuttings, I self-mulch/leave the cuttings mulched on the lawn and don't bag. One day I mow the lawn and leave for some errands. I come home to the cuttings I had left on the lawn, all raked up and thrown all over my front porch/door, with a threatening note telling me if this ever happened again and I did not do my lawn properly from now on, there would be consequences and it would be worse next time. I went over to my neighbor's house, told her I would call the police for threatening me if she ever tried a stunt like this again, and that next time she had a problem, maybe try talking with me like an adult, and gave her my phone number. Her husband apologized and said his wife was bad crap crazy and he was really sorry. The wife never apologized. I then promptly did not mow the front lawn for over 6 months, no HOA, and I made sure to mow the backyard and make a display of bagging those cuttings and carrying them out front for the neighbor to see, but left the front nice and overgrown. I also ended up having her car towed from in front of her own house. Coincidentally, code enforcement cannot force you to mow your lawn, but if you leave a vehicle on the street for over 72 hours without moving it, they will impound. $600 later, she got her car back and I have not heard a peep from her. Edit, because you all keep saying he and him, referencing the OP, I am a female, women can own their own houses and do the lawn too. Or not in this case. You know guys, I don't know if it is just me, but I think that some people take the whole mowing your front lawn and keeping your garden good looking etc. way too serious. I mean, I have nothing against a good looking garden, but the person in the story seems like her only purpose in life is to have a good looking front lawn. Either way, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. If we could reach 1000 likes on a video, that would be absolutely amazing. Let's try to reach it. Thank you very much in advance. And the next one is a fantastic revenge story, and it is titled Neighborhood Pervert Gets What's Coming to Him. My family and I moved into this new neighborhood when I was in elementary school and we loved it. Our neighbors were great, the house was great, everything was perfect except for one thing. A few blocks down the road was this creepy old man, I will call him the Creep. After making friends with some of the neighborhood kids and getting settled into the new house, my family and I learned that the Creep was, in fact, a peeping Tom, notorious for wandering around the neighborhood alone, looking into people's windows in the evenings. He was even caught on multiple occasions in my friend's backyard trying to sneak a peek into their upstairs window where their high school daughter was showering. They of course called the police, but by the time the cops showed up, the creep was gone. Unfortunately, since they did not catch him red-handed, and because my friend's family did not have any hard evidence of him trespassing/snooping around, there was nothing the police could do but patrol around their house for a little while and then leave. Luckily for us, our house sat at a good 40 to 50 yards off the main road. We had a really long driveway, so the threat of the creep making his way behind our house to try and peep into the bathroom windows was minimal. Because of this, we assumed that we were safe from the creep's perverted and disgusting tendencies, but boy, were we wrong. I have two younger sisters who, at the time, were quite young, probably around 4 and 6, and we had a pretty big front yard and a long driveway, so they would often run around playing tag in the yard or ride their little pink bicycles up and down the driveway. My mom would always sit near the window at the front of the house so she could keep an eye on them while she read a book or finished some paperwork for her job or whatever. One day my sisters were playing in the front yard like they always did, with my mom watching from the window. My brother and I were gone until later that evening. I think we were at football practice or something, so it was just my mom, dad and the girls at home. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another average day. However, on this particular day, the creep happened to be out patrolling the neighborhood again. He walked past our front yard and noticed the girls playing in the driveway. With my mom slightly distracted with whatever she was doing, the creep took the opportunity to hide behind a cluster of trees near the edge of our property and call out to my sisters from the road. "Psst, over here, psst." He made a "come here" motion with his index finger in an effort to lure them behind the tree line and subsequently out of my mom's line of sight. Luckily, my mom had always been paranoid that we would get abducted as kids, so she had trained us, almost excessively, never to go with a stranger, so my sisters shook their heads and yelled, "No!" By this time, my mom had looked up and noticed my sisters talking in the general direction of the trees. Concerned, she got my dad, who was sitting in the next room, and they both rushed outside to see what was going on. The creep immediately noticed my dad heading towards him at a pretty fast pace and tried to piece the scene. My dad was not having it, Dad yelling condescendingly, "Hey buddy, is there anything I can help you with?" The creep, "Oh no, I was just saying hello," or something along those lines. Sisters, "He was trying to get us to come over there. He was going like this," imitates come here motion. Dad, clearly agitated, ready to end this man's whole life. "Oh, is that so?" The creep denies it. Dad, "Let me tell you how things are going to work from now on, okay? You will not walk by my front yard again, not even on the other side of the street. And if I ever see you talking to my daughters again, well, let's just say you'd better hope the cops can get here before I can get my shotgun." The creep, "Yes sir, it won't happen again," promptly leaves. So, a couple of hours later, my brother and I come home from wherever we were and hear about the events that transpired in our absence. We were understandably furious, and due to our underdeveloped, overly hormonal brains, we were also slightly irrational. We decided that the strict warning our father had issued the creep was not enough. We wanted to take matters into our own hands, so we did what any 12-year-olds in our situation would do. We doorbell ditched him over and over again. While this may seem like an underwhelming and relatively mild response, I can assure you that the psychological torment we imposed on this man was anything but. For months this went on. Whenever friends from outside the neighborhood came over, we would get them to doorbell ditch his house too. We would ring his doorbell and then make a bolt for the bushes, watching from afar to see his reaction. At first he did not really give much of a reaction, but over time our antics really got under his skin and he would come flying out the front door in a fit of rage, cussing and yelling in our general direction. Eventually, doorbell ditching just was not doing it for us anymore. We needed to take it up a notch. The creep deserved much worse than a frequent doorbell ditch. Since we were only in middle school, there was only so much we could do, plus our parents were quite strict, so whatever we did would have to be under their radar, so to speak. They did not know about the doorbell ditching either. We plotted and schemed and finally came up with a master plan. We would egg his house in the dead of night, write some less than pleasant messages on his car in Sharpie, and put a pile of crap on his front porch. We had a friend buy a couple dozen eggs for us, all to share, collected the crap contribution from our generous golden retriever, it was a doozy, and headed off to his house, hell-bent on retribution. Everything went exactly as planned. We pelted his house with eggs, wrote a few friendly messages on his car, and left our precious pooch's gift right on his front porch. We even called an audible and egged his car just for good measure. Long story short, I never saw that man walk past our front yard ever again. And I gotta say guys, that was a quite satisfying story. Did you ever have any neighborhood creeps? And if so, what would you have done to them? Let us know your evil plans in the comments. And the next one is titled, "It is too loud when I snowblow your sidewalk?" Okay. I have a sweet snowblower and I love to help out my neighbors by doing the whole block. I am that guy. After a moderate snow a few years ago, 6 inches, my neighbor told me that he's very sensitive to noise and not to snowblow in front of his house. So later that same winter we got 17 inches, I got every house on the block front and back except for his. Even better, he was out of town, the weather warmed slightly for an afternoon and then dropped again, so his 17 inches of snow became a wall-to-wall glacier. I live in Wisconsin, this is how we entertain ourselves in the winter. Edit, wow, thought I was just sharing a little story, thanks for all the interest, here's a little more. He was not medically sensitive to sound. If he was, he would have said so and I would have respected that. I often saw him outside listening to the brewers on a loud radio as he did yard work, with municipal trucks and ambulances etc. rolling by. Also, it was late morning. This is a guy who returned a plate of cookies because he was upset that we did not know that he thinks sugar is evil. He yelled at kids for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Total dick. Number 2, we did not speak often and he never mentioned the ice wall. I do not have any photos unfortunately, it was hilarious. Even sat on the edge of it and had a beer with my other neighbor. Number 3, he moved to Iowa a year or so later. How is this for passive aggressive? Thank God he moved because Iowa might be just nice enough to handle him. And I gotta say guys, the last one I did not really understand. Is Iowa well known for having extraordinarily nice people? Let me know in the comments if you know what OP meant. In addition, I'm curious, what was the most snow you have ever seen in your life in front of your house? Have you ever gotten 17 inches of snow? Let us know about your experiences in the comments. And the last one is an epic HOA revenge story and it is titled Taking on the Homeowners Association President. This happened when my wife and I first got married. My grandfather had passed just a couple months before and left me a very sizable inheritance with a note to make sure I use it smartly to start a good life for my wife and I. My father-in-law downs a real estate company that buys foreclosed houses and rehabs them, and he knew of a great starter home for my wife and I and agreed to pay to have it rehabbed with the understanding that we would pay him back when we were better established or after 2 years when we sold the house. So we bought the house and it took about 90 days to rehab it before we moved in. This is an important fact later on. So we finally moved into our house and had been there about 2 weeks when someone came and knocked on our door stating that they were the Homeowners Association HOA president and asked for my landlord's contact information. I explained that we did not rent the home and that we were the owners, and then they followed that up by asking to speak with my parents. I reiterated again that I was the homeowner and asked them what they wanted. They explained that there was an HOA for the neighborhood and that I needed to sign the HOA rules and that I owed $90 prorated for my dues, but that they would give me 30 days to pay as a courtesy. However, they needed me to sign the rules right then. I told them I wanted to read and review them first before I agreed to sign anything, and they were extremely pushy about signing them right then. I refused, and they told me that I had 7 days to sign them and explained that they have legal power to fine me if I do not turn in a signed copy in that time. I called my in-laws because I did not know anything about HOAs and asked them for their advice. My father-in-law got pissed, saying that it should have been disclosed prior to the sale. But sometimes with HUD houses that gets missed, we agreed that the $30 per month fee was not horrible, especially because they did provide a really nice playground for the neighborhood. So I agreed and signed the rules. There were a couple that seemed a little over the top to me, but I agreed anyway because from my understanding at the time, I really did not have any choice. It seemed fine enough until about a month passed and we had a small housewarming party with a couple friends. Literally, there were less than 8 people there, including my wife and I. The house was small, but it had a nice deck, so we were out back having a small fire using a fire pit one of our friends had just given us when I heard someone knocking at the door. No, actually it was pounding like a frickin' cop. I just went around the house and there was the HOA president with his car in front of my house with a yellow police light on top. Yes, I'm serious. I asked him how I could help him and he very sternly told me that I was in violation of the HOA rules by throwing a party outside of approved hours, 10 PM curfew, and that I needed to send my friends home or quietly take it inside. I checked my watch and it was 10:05 PM. I was amazed, but we took it inside regardless. The next day, the very next day, I had a letter from the HOA stating that it was my official warning for violation of the HOA rules by throwing a party, and I quote, "wild bonfire that was a safety hazard while drinking." I literally had not drank at all. Whatever, I brushed it off and figured it was no big deal. Flash forward 6 to 9 months, we were hosting a teen group devotional for our church one afternoon and we were playing a game of football in the street. We lived on a connecting street that got virtually no traffic and only had 2 houses on it, ours and the family across from us, whose kids were also playing in the game. All of a sudden, I hear a police siren and see the yellow light flashing. HOA president gets out and tells us that we have to break it up immediately as it is a safety hazard because one of the kids could run over. I was fed up with him and told him that they were fine and that we have been watching for cars and that he was literally the first car we have seen and we had been playing for over an hour at that point. He insists and asks what would happen if an ambulance or police officer needed to come down that street to save someone's life. This was stupid because literally both streets we were connected to have entrances from the main road, so I gave in and we went inside. The next day I get a letter explaining that I was being fined $60, the maximum fine allowed for a first offense, and that if I wanted to protest it, I could attend the next HOA meeting. I decide that I want to protest the fine, but noticed that the fine was due in 30 days and the next HOA meeting was not for 35 days. I opted not to pay until after the hearing and wrote a letter back to the HOA president stating as such. I go to the meeting and it is literally myself, the HOA president, the HOA secretary, president's wife, vice president, president's neighbor, and treasurer, vice president's wife. My protest was immediately overruled and I was also charged a $30 late fee for not paying on time despite notifying him. I was fed up, I could not take it any longer, but realized I really didn't have any recourse. About 4 to 5 months later, we gave birth to our first child and about a month after that I was driving home one night. I was working a second job in retail at the time and my buddy in the military called me. He had been deployed when my daughter was born and was calling to congratulate me. When I got home, I did not want to risk waking up my sleeping newborn daughter, so I just sat in my car with the engine running as it was a little chilly outside. I sat there for about half an hour when I heard the police siren and saw the yellow lights. Now keep in mind, police sirens are not quiet and this was right in front of my house. His stupid yellow light was flashing everywhere, including into my daughter's bedroom. I got out of the car and rather rudely told him to turn off the light as to not wake up my daughter. He explained that I looked suspicious sitting in my car with it running outside of my house, and I explained the situation, and he told me I had to go inside and that my history of being a troublemaker would not grant me any leniency. I basically told him where I thought he could go and proceeded to sit on the hood of my car. He sat there for another 15 minutes telling me I needed to go in, and at one point touched my shoulder. I explained to him that if he touched me again, I would take it as a sign of aggression and defend myself, which he responded by getting in his car and leaving. He circled the block about 4 times the next 30 minutes, which was when I got too cold to stay out and finally went inside. Next day, I get a hand-delivered letter from him and the vice president, and he also asks me to step outside to talk about last night's incident. He explained that he was being nice by not calling the police on me after I threatened him, at which point I cut him off and told him that he needed to get off my property before I called the police on him for trespassing. I read the letter and saw that he was giving me 2 different fines for $180 each, which were the maximum amounts, one for violating curfew and one for disobeying the night watchman. I was done, I had reached my breaking point. This is where the revenge comes in. I start looking into HOA laws and regulations regarding fines and how to protest them, because I felt like this was clearly abuse. I find that the law states that you must be notified of an HOA 10 days prior to closing on a home and must be served with the HOA rules within 45 days of purchase, or you are not subject to being forced to participate in the HOA. I remember that we were not served until after we moved in, which was close to 90 days after we closed. So I called my real estate agent, who is a very close family friend. My in-laws have bought literally thousands of houses from her over the past 35 years, and asked if she had the paperwork still, and she said she can get me a copy. I looked and it was over 90 days after purchase that we were notified, and there was no disclosure statement at closing. Realtor says she must have replaced it because it is required by law to be provided prior to the sale, and basically that she wouldn't miss something like that because it comes to her when they do a title inspect on the house whether or not there is a registered HOA. She does a little digging and calls me back 2 days later and says that my neighborhood does not have an HOA registered with the city or county, which is required. So I end up calling the county office in charge of registering and give them the neighborhood name, and she says that our neighborhood is registered in the other city and not in our city, and that if we wanted to start an HOA we would have to follow these certain steps, and that without those the HOA wouldn't be allowed to collect any money or have any authority. Apparently what had happened was our neighborhood was originally all in one city, but when the city lines changes, the neighborhood was split in half. The other neighborhood kept the HOA that was registered, and our HOA president was supposed to register with the state, but did not feel like jumping through all of the hoops that it required. I was ready to walk down to the president's house and rip into him, but decided to be smart for a minute. I talked to my neighbor across the street, who also hated the HOA, and told him what I found out. He was furious about it as well. We talked to a few more and get a group of about 10 of us together that we agree we need to show up at the next HOA meeting. Word had apparently spread because there ended up being more people than the library meeting room could host. I had specifically asked to be the speaker for the group, which they were nice enough to let me do. The president tried to prevent me from speaking due to being overdue on my fines. At this point, I am about 3 weeks late on my last set of fines with a $30 per week penalty on each fine, so my current bill is set to about $540, but I spoke anyway. I explained to them that I had contacted my in-laws attorney, also a family friend, who had drafted together a lawsuit regarding the fact that they were impersonating a registered HOA in order to collect money from us, which was fraud. The president dismissed me and said I had no idea what I was talking about and that he had enough of my antics. The staff members all left immediately while the rest of us stayed and talked. A month later, we served them formally, myself and 20 other homeowners, suing them for all fines and HOA dues we had paid to the tune of approximately $50,000, as some of these families had been there over 10 years. The president and vice president got their own attorney who attempted to legitimize the HOA, but it required the signature of like 90% of the homeowners. They got 3 signatures, including the 2 of themselves, and some other old bitter hacks signed. After that failed, they tried to settle by agreeing to abolish the HOA and showed that they had not financially gained from it and that all funds had been used for the park upkeep, snow removal and other neighborhood events. We took a vote and this was turned down in overwhelming fashion. I was surprised I actually voted to accept this, and then about a week later one of the other families calls and mentions something about the park maintenance and snow removal. Apparently he had given a quote to do the landscaping for the park, cutting the grass, mulching, etc., and his quote had been a couple $100 cheaper than what they were paying, and that it had always bothered him because the person that did those jobs was the vice president's son, and that what they were paying him was pretty outrageous in terms of what is standard. Eventually it went to court, where the judge looked at everything and mandated that they pay $21,000, $1,000 per homeowner, plus attorney and court fees, which were like another $2,000, for a total of $23,000 in damages. Additionally, they were fined by the city's governing body after it was reported. I don't know how much that fine was though. We ended up selling the house that following summer, but I talked to a couple friends that still lived there about a year after it, and they said that the president and vice president both sold their houses and moved away because they were pretty much hated by everyone in the neighborhood, and that they had an informal HOA that people donated to for upkeep of the park. Too long didn't read, and by the way, I really enjoyed this one. Cranky old man makes up a fake HOA to put himself on a power trip, but never took the time to register it after the city lines were changed. I end up suing him along with 20 other homeowners for fraud. And I gotta admit guys, that was probably one of the greatest HOA/revenge stories in general that we have ever witnessed. If you agree, please let me know in the comments, and either way, unfortunately, we have reached the end of the video, and I would just like to remind you, if you haven't already, please head on over to patreon.com/ripeyouTube if you want to see exclusive Reddit content read by me. This also includes Just No Mother-in-Law stories. So therefore, if you need your ripe Just No Mother-in-Law fix, then I suggest going to Patreon. So far we have around 20 plus videos, and there are more coming each week. Either way guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I see you again tomorrow.